Let's get started. So thanks so much for joining us today on this webinar. My name is Rob. I'm the founder and CEO of Koyfin. I have my co-founder on with me as well, Rich Miedo. He'll be on answering the Q&A and helping out. First of all, I want to say that I hope everyone is staying safe and navigating these crazy markets. A couple of housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. We'll send you a link to the copy of the webinar to your email that you registered with. The one thing I would recommend in terms of the logistics of this presentation is that you follow along, that you don't go on Koyfin and try to do all the things that we're going over so as not to miss anything. And then afterwards, you can poke around, obviously, and view the recording. But as I'm going through it, our experience has been that it's best if you just follow along and do it that way. The Q&A, that box that's open, you can ask questions in there. Rich is going to answer any outstanding questions, and if there's anything that I miss or anything that I can go over and we have time at the end, I'll do that as well. One common question is going to be on pricing. How much is Koyfin going to cost? Why is it free? We don't have the pricing set right now. We'll have advanced tiers, so we'll have pricing later on this year for more advanced functionality, more advanced tiers. But right now, Koyfin is entirely free, and anything you create, such as templates of dashboards, you'll have access to, so don't worry about losing that. But that's a common question that we get, so I wanted to address that right away. All right, so with that, let me get started on the actual demo of Koyfin and walk you through the functionality. I'm just gonna share my screen here. Okay. So Koyfin is a web-based tool. Obviously, I'm on a browser here. The first thing to mention is that Koyfin only is fully supported in the Google Chrome browser. So please make sure that you're using Google Chrome when you're using Koyfin. Otherwise, there will be some bugs. And we do intend to support other browsers in the future, but right now, make sure you're using Google Chrome. The other thing is, if you're on a laptop, so if you're on a smaller screen, you may not be able to see all the information. This is a big screen that I'm using. I'm using a big monitor. But if you're on a smaller screen, one trick to do is then take the zoom to 80%. And if you take the zoom to 80%, then a lot more content is going to fit on your screen. Our site is built that you don't have to you don't have to scroll. So we try to fit all the content in the context of one screen. And that's why it's easier to put the zoom on 80% to make it fit better. Please don't put it on 90% because that causes issues with a Google Chrome bug, but 80% or 100% should be fine. The other thing to look out for in terms of the settings is we have dark mode, which a lot of people find very useful. So to the extent that you like the Darth Vader mode, kind of the old school terminal mode, we have that as well. So you can pick whatever layout you want in your user settings section as well. The other things to point out here are the contact us button. This goes directly to us, and one of us will answer kind of any questions or feedback that you have, and we're pretty responsive there. And then another thing to point out is this help button over here, which takes you to our help pages. So we have a lot of guidance and a lot of articles on how to use different things. So if you have any questions, make sure you search this content before you ask us, because a lot of the things that people ask about are written about here. And then the other thing I'll point out before getting into the actual functionality is some social features. So we have a Twitter account, LinkedIn account, and then also a blog that you can click on here. If you're registered for Koyfin, you'll be emailed this blog, the blog links as they're updated, but basically we go through different market themes and really illustrate how to use Koyfin to navigate the market. So this is an interesting thing to follow as well. Let me close that up. The other thing I'll point out that not too many people know is Koyfin does have a mobile version. So we don't have an app that you could download on the App Store, but you can appify Koyfin, which is almost as good as an app. And the instructions to do that are actually in the help guide. If you go in the help guide and you go to Koyfin Mobile Web, we have a very short article explaining how mobile web is designed. and then a 30-second YouTube video on how to do that. So once you go through this video, let me fast forward here. Get this out of the way. Once you actually go through the steps, this is my phone, this is my dog, this is my wife, but this is my iPhone screen. You'll have Koyfin, an icon here that you could then use for your iPhone, or to the extent you have an Android device, you could do that as well. So that's over here. Okay, getting straight into the system in terms of what's on our system. So one of the things that is really interesting about Koyfin is we have a lot of different data on our system. So not only equities, but ETFs, mutual funds, FX, bonds, economic data. And in today's world, in today's macro markets, you definitely want to look at the whole picture. You don't want to just look at one particular asset class. So the way to think about it in terms of understand what's on our system, which data on our system is, you can click on the search bar over here, which I'll go over in more detail later on, but the search bar is divided into different sections. So you could actually see which asset categories are in our system. So to the extent you want to look for energy and you want to look for an energy ETF, that would be over here, or any kind of economic data would be over here. So these are the different categories of assets that we have on our system. The other thing we have is, if you go to the help, back to the help desk, we do have a data overview. So you can read kind of like what data we have on our data overview. And then at the end of the article, we have this really nifty link that not a lot of people know about, which takes you to the data directory. And the data directory is a place where you can browse the data. So for example, if I want to look at United States economic data, I could click on the United States link, and then I could browse kind of all the stuff that we have here. And if I wanted to search for, let's say, housing, I could see all the indicators that we have for housing and see what the ticker is to be able to access on Koyfin. So that's a really useful way to understand what data is on our system. Going back to kind of the Koyfin interface, there's three main sections in Koyfin, kind of the way to think about us in terms of navigating the system. This menu bar helps organize our system. So there's three sections here. The first section here is called My Dashboards. That's where you're going to be creating a watch list of stocks and organizing a watch list of securities any way you want. The second section is our category cross-asset pages. So basically what we did here is we took all the cross-asset macro data on Koyfin, and then we organized it so you could browse the market. So this is kind of where you browse what's going on in different asset classes and different markets, and I'll go through that in a sec. And then the third section here is called security analysis. That's where you're gonna research or investigate a specific security, an individual security. So here I have QQQ selected, but I could select Apple or another security, and I'll go through all the analysis here for individual securities. But that's the lay of the land in terms of three sections on how to organize things: My Dashboards, cross-asset category dashboards, and then specific security analysis. Let me start with these cross-asset dashboards because that's the really the home page. So when you log into Koyfin, you'll start in today's markets, which is our one of our main cross-asset pages. And in today's markets, you see a bunch of different sections. So a couple of different things to point out here. One is you see this graph. I have 4 securities in here. The way I select these securities, these graphs, is I tick them off over here. So I could select different things. So right now I have Russell 2000, S&P 500. I could add energy, financials, or I could add all the sectors here, and then I could kind of hover over them to see what's going on. I could change this to a 5-day view, so then it would be a more intraday view, or I could change this to a 1-day view. I have a lot of securities here, so maybe let's take something out. So this will help you kind of navigate what's going on in today's market. So we have some major market indices, sectors, fixed income, factors, global yields, currencies, some global markets, and commodities. A frequently asked question is, well, you have all this data. How often is the data updated? How do I know is it live data? Is it not live data? So we describe kind of the frequency of the data in that help article in terms of data overview. For equities, we have a combination of live and delayed prices. And so what you have to do is you have to hover over this to the left of each name. So Russell 2000, there's a little circle here. And when you hover over it, it will give you the timestamp. So this is actually a live price because right now it is 111. And so for these major indices and ETFs, we do get a live price. For a lot of the equities that we have in our system, we get a live price from IEX, but just to make sure, you could always hover over this timestamp to see what the price is. For less liquid names, the price will be delayed. So for example, Australia here, the timestamp is 12:56, and the reason I knew it was delayed is because this circle is going to be gray instead of green. So whenever it's green, it's going to be live. Whenever it's gray, it's going to be delayed. So just keep that in mind as you're navigating the system. The other thing to point out here are these little jump links. So whenever we have a jump link on our website, what that does is take you to a more detailed section of whatever you want to look at. So for example, if I click on this jump link, what it's going to do is it's going to create a graph in this section with these securities. So let me just do that to show you how that works. So once I did that, it created a security Dow Jones. It took me to the intraday graph. And then here, I just have a lot more flexibility to add different securities, where on the home page, you don't have that much flexibility. So on here, I could do a lot more things because it's the actual chart. Whereas before, where I was in today's markets, this is just a very basic chart to think about. Okay, so that's kind of how to think about the homepage, how to navigate the homepage, a very frequently used dashboard in our system. The next page, top news, self-explanatory. We have trending news from around the web, latest news, and we have some tweets that we curated for you, which we've picked out who the sources for these tweets, so you can't customize it, but something we want to do in the future. The World Equity Indices is a slightly different dashboard than the homepage, and this is how a lot of the dashboards on Koyfin are organized. So you have a table, you have a graph. Again, you have these boxes, which similar to kind of before, you can check off what you want to see in the graph. You can move this separator left and right to make the chart smaller or bigger. So if you want more space on your table, you can drag that to the right. You can also select custom columns. So to the extent I want to see 1 week change or month to date change, I can move that up, and that'll appear in my table. So I moved up 1 week, and it's now over here. I can also sort by these columns. So make sure you can, that you can click on these column headers, and here I'll be sorted by year to date, so I can see what's performing year to date and what's underperforming year to date. And a lot of the international indices we have are end of day. And again, you can click on the circle to the left to see the timestamp. So make sure that you're doing that. I'm going to skip over the countries dashboard, self-explanatory, and the sectors dashboard, also self-explanatory, similar to World Equity Indices. The factors dashboard is interesting. Again, same structure as the other dashboard, as the indices dashboard. The one thing I'd highlight here is that in the factors dashboard, when you look at the ticker, let me just pull up the ticker here. These tickers are relative to the SPY, and the way you know that is you can hover over this information icon. So these tickers are relative to the SPY. So small caps are up 2.63% relative to the SPY. Let me just move this a little to the right. And then you could also, what's interesting is get a Z-score, and that's really helpful because that gives you the standard deviation move, and it normalizes some of the moves for volatility. And then over here on the graph, you could also see that the factors here are relative to SPY, so we show that in the graph as well. And if I kind of, one way to illustrate what's going on here is growth and value, obviously a big trend in the market, and you can look at it over the past 3 years or 1 year, whatever it is. So this is a really important dashboard to monitor in terms of factors in the market. Under the equity section, we have a bunch of things. I'm just going to touch on one dashboard that's pretty useful. It's called our movers dashboard. So the way this works is in the sidebar here, I select which index I want. So I'm selecting the S&P 500. And then what we show you is the one-day return versus the volume that the stock is trading on. And the way that we show volume is the volume today relative to the past 10 days. And it's a snapshot in time. So right now it's about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And what we do is we compare the volume today versus the volume of the past 10 days. So you can see here Gilead is moving on about an 8% move, but it's moving on 8 times volume. And that's something that's obviously very important because of the new trials or the announcement last night. But I'm scrolling here with my mouse, and then I could see kind of what other stocks are trading on a big up move and big volume. In this selection, you could also select an ETF. So for example, if I wanted to look at the XLF, I can select that and look at the constituents of the XLF and how they're moving on volume versus price. I could also select one of my dashboards. So we haven't gone over how to do that, but let's say I want to select my semis dashboard, which is my semi stocks, and then I'll be able to see what's going on in the semis market as well. So this movers page really interesting. I'm not gonna for the sake of saving some time, I'm not gonna go through the rest of these macro dashboards. You could click around on them, pretty easy to kind of explore, but just check those out. We have some equity dashboards here. We have some fixed income dashboards in terms of yields, yield curves, corporate credit, fixed income, which are pretty interesting. And then we have some macro dashboards in terms of currencies, commodities, world economics, and the economic calendar, which you could change for any country or several countries at once. So just make sure you're aware that these dashboards exist and you could play around with them. All right, so now that we've covered the cross-asset category section, I wanna jump into the security analysis. So remember, this is where you browse data, where we created different cuts of the market for you to browse. This is where you're gonna actually analyze a particular security. And so this is kind of the meat of the analytics and the tools that we created for analyzing security. Let me just change this to Apple, just because we have a little bit more data on Apple than the Dow Jones. But the way this works is once you select a security, you'll be able to look at the different tools or the different dashboards that we have enabled for that security. So for example, for Apple, the first thing that I select here is the security snapshot. When you pull up the security snapshot, this quote box is going to be on top no matter what kind of dashboard or no matter which of these analyses you're in. So this quote box stays on here for the security that you have selected. One thing I'd say is you could change the options of this quote box. So for example, if I wanted to look at the EV to EBITDA, I could select that and I could move it up to be in the second position here. And then it would show up here, or you can move these around pretty easily. So this is a pretty easy way to have a quote box with the general most important information that you want. In the snapshot, we give you a lot of kind of high level information. So what does the company do? Market cap, beta, stuff like that. Whenever you see something underlined, that means you can click on it, and usually will take you to the time series. So for example, if I click on market cap, what that's going to do is it's going to take me to the graph and graph market cap. Let me do that just to show you how it works. So what that did is it took me to the historical graph of Apple, and then it loaded up the market cap. I'll go through the more advanced ways to handle this graph, but just be aware that once you're in here, you could always click on these items to see the time series, which is pretty useful. So we have some performance here. We have some valuation here in terms of forward and trailing valuation, cap structure, and earnings estimates. So this will give you a really nice high-level overview of the stock. Financial analysis is a very useful tool. So we have our income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow for Apple. All this data comes from Capital IQ, so very high-quality source, really professional grade data. And then you can sort of scroll through this, and we have it organized by different items. You can also this little graph is something that you can hover over to see a timeline of whatever item you want. So for example, if I wanted to see the timeline of interest and investment income, I can, some things are actually not hoverable, but interest expense, I could hover over that and we'll give you a quick series of what that looks like. And then we prepared some other series here for you in terms of financial highlights, profitability and liquidity, long-term solvency. One request we get is, hey, I want to create my own kind of spreadsheet here or my own template, which we're working on and will definitely allow you to do in the future. But right now, these are sort of preset items that we've selected for you. The next dashboard to think about is the estimates dashboard. So this is a really useful dashboard, not really found on a lot of other systems that aren't Bloomberg or some of the other expensive systems. But basically, we give you a snapshot here of the consensus estimates for Apple. So here's the price target and the breakdown of the different analysts on Wall Street in terms of how they rate the stock. Next is you have a estimate matrix, so by year. So this is 2020, 21, 22, and this is by quarter. So we lay out the estimate matrix here for you. And then we also lay out the same estimates in a slightly different way. So we lay out the estimates like this, and then we show you what the PE is based on the estimates, and then some revision numbers. So obviously revisions are very important. You could see here over the past 3 months, Apple's revisions are being revised. Apple's EPS is being revised down, which is important. And this is a graphical way of seeing this table. So these are all the individual estimates and how they're trending over time. So you can see here the 3-month change for let's say the 1-month change for 2022 is down 4%. And you could see that pretty clearly according to these numbers. So this is a graphical representation of what the earnings revisions are doing over time, which is important to see how analysts are changing their numbers for the upcoming years and quarters. The other thing to highlight here is that you could also click on revenue. So this is consensus revenue and consensus EBITDA. So not only do you have EPS here, you have other things as well to see how estimates are trending over time. Last thing that I'll cover is the news dashboard. So we have news for the company. We have the Twitter feed set up so you can see who's tweeting about it and what they're saying. And then we also have the SEC filing. So you could kind of narrow down or filter what you want and highlight which financials you want and this goes to the SEC website. So all these links are linked to the SEC website. So pretty useful as well. All right. So that's the news dashboard. Rounds out the kind of the fundamental dashboards we have for the different companies. I wanted to move next to the graphing tools that we have available, and the graphing tools are really some of the most powerful differentiated tools we have on the platform. There's a lot in here. I'm just going to touch on some basic stuff, but basically, when you're in a graphing template, so when you go to the historical graph, let me just close this up to make room here. The way this works is you obviously have this graph, and the inputs for that graph are here in what we call the series manager. So in this sidebar over here, right now I have Apple selected, and I have my historical chart and my simple moving average. Sorry, let me just go to an unsafe template, and I'll explain what these templates mean. But if I'm in an unsafe template, I have my Apple here, and I have my market capitalization, which was my what I loaded before. So the way that I add different series is in here. So let's say I wanted to add just the price. I could type it into here, and it would add the historical price. Let me take out the market cap. We have about 250 indicators here that you can add. So make sure you browse these and you really understand what we have here in terms of market data, performance. So I could add the cumulative total return. And these buttons are how you control which specific series you add for total return. So for example, C means cumulative, D is daily, W is weekly. So we give you kind of definition of these. And whenever you don't have buttons, you just select. That means you don't have an option to change the series. You just select the main series. But let me just select like total return as another one. I'll go down to performance here. I'll select relative strength. I'll go down to valuation here, and I'll select PE NTM. I'll go to margins and ratios, and I'll select let's say I want EBITDA margin LTM. And then let's say I want to, instead of browsing these, I actually want to select short interest, but I don't know how to find it. So what you can do is, this is actually a search bar as well. So I could actually search for short interest, and it'll look through here and it'll find the term that you're looking for. So I want short interest as a percentage of shares outstanding, and I selected that, and now that's kind of like my graph. So this is my graph. These are the series that I've selected in the graph. Let's say I wanted to change any kind of settings for these series. Most of the time they would be in here. So let's say instead of Apple versus SPY for relative strength, I actually want to change this to QQQ because that's maybe more appropriate to look at. I could do that here. And let's say for short interest, I actually want it to be a dark gray line that's dotted because that's what I want. So I would do that here. So remember, you have these settings here. And let's say for my chart, I actually want it to be a line chart instead of a candle chart or an open, high, low, close chart. I could select that here as well. So remember, all the settings that you have would be selected here. You also have the ability to then combine the different series where appropriate. So let's say I actually wanted to combine Apple's relative strength versus the total return. I can do that with the buttons in the legend. So on each graph, you'll have this legend, and this will give you the ability to merge this above. This will give you the ability to merge it below. So let's say I want to merge this above, and now I have the two series on the same line. And let's say that I actually wanted the PE chart to be combined with the Apple chart. So let me just, I would move this graph up. So now I would move this in the up position. And now I want to merge these. And so I would merge it like this. All right. So now my graph has gotten a lot cleaner because before I had 6 panels. Now I have 4 panels. Let me delete this EBITDA margin graph because I'm not interested in it. And now I have this is my chart that I kind of want to have to look at. So one thing to, the other thing I want to mention in terms of customization is you can move these panels as well. So let's say I wanted short interest to be lower, and then I wanted this to be lower as well. So that would be kind of how I would reposition the charts. One thing that I'll mention is on these axes, sometimes you want to group these axes and sometimes you want to ungroup these axes. The best example is if I add another security like Facebook. So let me add Facebook, and then I'm just going to take out a bunch of stuff from here just to make it easier. And I'm just going to have Facebook PE. So Facebook PE here is on the same axis as Apple PE, and then Apple's price is on its own axis. So one thing I could do is I could turn the grouping off, and then each one of these is going to be on its own axis. So just remember, when you turn the grouping on and off on the axis, and the way I do that is I right click, when it's on, it'll combine the values that could be combined. So anything with the same units. And if you want it in different axes, you would turn the axes off and they would be on all different units. And remember also, you could also change for example, if I wanted to make this a max of 50, that would then change my y-axis graph. So really easy way to combine axes in different charts. Let me take this out because it's getting a little confusing. So now that I have my chart, it took me a little while to create it. Let's say this is kind of the chart that I want to look at all the time. What you would want to do to see this chart again without having to recreate it is you want to use this templates function. And basically what the template function is it saves this template for future use. So for example, if I wanted to save this, and I will call this my webinar template, I will save it over here. And once I save it as a template, it then shows up here as my webinar template. So that if I'm on my home page and I select Microsoft, and I select Microsoft in my security analysis, I don't want to recreate everything that I created before in terms of my series. I want to see this however I want to see this. So that's where the template comes in, is I could then just pull up the webinar template for Microsoft, and everything that I looked at for Apple will now be visible for Microsoft. So make sure you're utilizing these templates effectively. The other thing to note is that we have these annotations where you can draw on the graph. So to the extent that you want to highlight something or you want to do some kind of technical analysis, we give you the ability to draw these annotations. So we have a full toolkit here, which you can then highlight or draw different things. And these annotations, once I draw these annotations, they'll save automatically for each ticker and template combination. So to the extent I have webinar template and Microsoft loaded as my ticker, these annotations will automatically save for next time. So just remember about annotations. The other thing to note about template, so let's say I'm in this template right here, and let's say I want to add another series. Let's say I wanted to look at revenues because that's kind of what I want to do, and so I add that here. If I don't hit save on my template, this revenue series is not going to be here next time. So make sure that whenever you have a save template and you change it, you hit the save button. Okay, so let me actually just show you. I didn't save this. I'm going to go back to the home page, and then I'm going to pull up my G chart. Notice here that didn't save because I didn't save my template. But now if I add revenue and I hit save, that is now going to be part of my webinar template. So that if I go to the home page and I go to the graph, that's going to be there. So make sure you're using the save template to the extent you're changing your template and you want it to save. You have to explicitly hit save. You could also save as a new template, so you don't have to override the template. You could save it as a new template. And just remember that annotations save automatically. You don't have to hit save on the template. So one thing that I want to highlight on this chart, now that you have this chart, you could very easily scroll with your mouse. So what I'm doing is I'm scrolling with my mouse like you would do through a page. I'm scrolling up and down, and that'll change the time frame of the graph. You could also select the time frame up here. So if I want to look at 5-year or 10-year, I can do that. You can also change the settings of the graph. So we have a lot of setting functions here. So for example, if I want to change the font or grid or my mouse over settings or anything on panel 1, which was that right-click shortcut before, or log or linear, make sure you're familiar with the settings button, which really gives you control of this graph, and make sure you save whatever settings that you change on the graph. The other thing to point out is once I have this graph, and let me make this a little less busy. So I'm just gonna delete this. And I'm going to save this as my template. So let's say this is my graph, and I actually want to share it with someone. I want to print it. I want to download it. We have this save and share button, which will bring you to this dialog box. And in this dialog box, I can download this graph. I can create a share link. So I could share a link with someone who doesn't even have to have Koyfin. They could click on the link and see this graph. So that's a cool way to kind of share stuff with someone. I could actually post it on Twitter. So to the extent that you're on Twitter, and if you're not, you should be. It's a great resource for investing. You could type kind of whatever you want. This is a chart. And you would kind of have this checkbox to include the share link. And then if you hit post to Twitter, and that'll post to Twitter automatically with this chart, which is a really cool, useful feature. And then you could also embed this link in a blog. So to the extent that you want to embed this in a blog or another website, we'll give you the iframe code for that as well. One thing to mention, if you are using this to, for example, if you're downloading charts or you're tweeting charts, we have this kind of advanced button here, which allows you to edit the image more so than you could in the graph. So what we allow you to do is then put in a title. So you can put a title for the chart. Let me change this to 24. So now I have a chart title for the graph. You can also upload a logo. So if you want to brand your chart in any way, this is a really interesting way to do it. So for example, if I don't know what this bull. Okay, so this was from my recent blog post, but let's say this is my corporate image or my corporate logo. I'm a financial advisor, or I work at a company, and I wanted to put my logo here. This is the way to do it. So you would upload your image, and your logo would go here. So to the extent that you then download the graph, that logo will appear here. So that's a really cool and interesting way to brand the chart. So make sure you're aware of these advanced options, and I could just delete that to get rid of the logo, which is fine as well. So really useful way to save, download charts in a pretty efficient way. The last thing I wanted to cover on this graphing stuff is these options are right now specific to the security that you have selected. So for example, if I have Microsoft here, I'll have a lot of kind of information here in terms of fundamentals, valuation. Just be aware that if you have for example, if I have a equity in here, sorry, an ETF in here. So this is my SPY. We're going to have just delete this. We're going to have other tools in here or other data series in here. So for ETFs, we have net asset value. We have short interest. You could look at different indicators. You could look at dividend yield. You could look at AUM. Under market data, we give you fund flows. So you could actually look at kind of cumulative fund flows for an ETF. So it's really interesting and powerful analysis that you don't really find on other systems. And then while I have the security loaded in SPY, so this is kind of like my different graphing stuff. The other thing that I want to point out is once you have a security loaded here in terms of an ETF, you'll also get this holdings analysis, which is really useful. So the holdings analysis, basically what we do is we give you the constituents of the ETF in a graphical form. So this is the weight, this is the return over the past month, or I could change that over the past year to date. So kind of see the different distribution of returns and weight. We also have this really interesting table where we give you all the ETF holdings. So these are all the stock holdings, which you can scroll through. And then not only we give you the weight and return, we also calculate the contribution. And so the contribution is very interesting because it adds up to the return of the ETF. So for example, year to date, I know that the SPY is down 11.6%, but Amazon is contributing 78 bips to that, Microsoft 55 bips. And I could flip this around to see which stocks are contributing the most in terms of a negative return. So this contribution analysis is really interesting because it'll tell you which stocks are driving the return of an ETF. And then we do the same thing for kind of like weight, return, and contribution on a sector level. So you can scroll down here and see that for the S&P in terms of on a negative contribution basis, financials are negatively contributing 358 basis points. And then utilities, healthcare, consumers, and real estate are really contributing very little in terms of negative performance. But this is a good way to see sector contribution, which is really interesting and really unique to what we're doing. The other charts I want to mention briefly are the GIP graph. So this is the intraday prices. Here I could select whatever days I want, or I could scroll out. I could add different securities. So I could add, for example, QQQ or IWM, and this will give you a quick way of looking at the intraday stuff. I could also change this to %, and then I could combine all these to give you a look in terms of what's moving over the past, let's say, 10 days, and gives you a sense of how things are moving. And obviously you could change these over here. So that's the intraday graph. And then the last one, which is really cool, we dedicate a graph to performance because it's so important. So here I could add different securities: Tesla, Amazon, Shopify, Netflix, and regional banks, let's say, are my securities I want to add. And I want to look at it on a year-to-date basis. So I could do that pretty easily. Again, I could zoom in and zoom out, and this will just recalculate it from zero very quickly. And then I can share the graph over here the same way that I talked about before. So a quick way to share the graph. The one thing I'd note here is that for equities, ETFs, and mutual funds, this analysis is total return, so it's including dividends. We don't have a way to show just price returns, but that's something that we want to do in the future. But this performance analysis right now, so if I add FMAG X, which is a Magellan mutual fund, that's going to give me the total return of Magellan, the total return of Netflix, the total return of, well, Netflix doesn't have a dividend, of SPY. So these are all total return numbers, and something to keep in mind. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the graphing section. Let me just take a sip of water. So one one thing I want to point out is if I hope you got a good sense of the data we have on the platform, and we have a lot of interesting data. Um, what we did is we made it easy for you to access that data using this kind of search command function. So this command function is a little similar if you've ever used a Bloomberg command function, but basically what it allows you to do, it allows you to search for what you're looking for very quickly. What I've done so far is I've really navigated on the menu and I've browsed to what I want to do. But what we allow you to do is access a ticker and function combination to get what you want. And what a function means is you see these shortcuts over here. These are different shortcut functions for what I want to look at. So for example, if I want to look at the Facebook snapshot, I would type in Facebook. I could just hit enter on my keyboard and it'll select the first selection here. And I would type in S and it would take me to the Facebook snapshot. And so if I wanted to look at the Apple graph, I could type in Apple G and then it will take me to the Apple graph over here. So, and if I wanted to do XLF HDS, which is the holdings, I could do that and it would take me to the XLF holdings. So this command bar is a really fast way to get around the system once you start learning these commands in terms of what you can do on the system instead of clicking on them. So it gives you these shortcuts. The other thing that I can do on here is if I wanted to, if I don't know the command and I want to search for something, I could, for example, type Apple market cap and it would actually tell me, hey, you could graph market cap. I could click on that and it would take me to the G chart. It would graph market cap here. If I wanted to look at Microsoft PE, I can do that as well. And it would take me to the graph highlighting Microsoft PE. If I wanted to look at global yields, it would actually find this function for me and tell me, hey, there's a function here that has global yield. So make sure you learn how to use this command bar because it's a really fast way to get around the system and really something that's pretty powerful. The other thing to remember about the command bar is we have ratios which are important for a lot of people. So for example, if I want to look at Apple versus SPY, I would type Apple : SPY and it would then create a ratio for me. And then I could look at that ratio in a G graph, right? So then I go to my G graph and I have my ratio here as well. Let me put this in an unsafe template. Let's say I wanted to look at Facebook versus Micron, I could do that as well. If I wanted to look at, let's say QQQ versus regional banks, KRE, which is an interesting chart, I could do that as well. So really an effective way to look at ratios. You could also do ratios whenever you add a securities. For example, I have QQQ versus KRE. I could then look at, for example, XLU versus TLT if that's what I want to look at. And so it would create these two different ratios. Here, I'd probably want to have them on separate axes to give them a little bit more room. But you could sort of see how these ratios play out and how they interact. So that's an important function on ratios. Okay, so last section I wanted to cover is my dashboards. And my dashboards is definitely one of our more popular functions, one of our more powerful functions and differentiated functions. So the way that let me just click on a different dashboard for introduction. So this is the semiconductor dashboard that I mentioned before that I have. These are my semiconductor stocks. So I have my dashboard. I have my table. I have my graph, and I have my news dashboard. And the way to populate this table is you create a new dashboard. So I'm just gonna call this dashboard webinar demo. And I have my dashboard of securities here. I could add securities here. So for example, I could add Microsoft, Tesla, TLT, SPY. If you have a list of securities in a CSV file, another system, what you can do is you could actually copy paste them into this input box. And so let me kind of show you quickly how to do that. So for example, if I wanted to look at all the retail securities, all the securities in the XRT ETF, I might want to go to the market scatter plot, which we didn't cover, but here's a quick tutorial. I would add the XRT ETF here. These are my XRT securities. I could then download it. So I would download it to my computer in a CSV file. here. I'm just copying the securities. Let me see here. I'm just copying the securities into my memory, and I'm going to go back here. So I copied the securities from my CSV file. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And in here, I'm just going to paste them in. So I'm going to hit Control V, or you could right click. And that's going to auto populate all the securities that you have pasted into your clipboard. So this is a really fast way if you have a bunch of securities to put them in here instead of typing them out one by one. So a pretty good hack. Now that I have my securities in here, what I want to do is I can actually go through these securities and look at how they look on the graph. So I could look at Microsoft, Tesla, TLT, SPY, and go through one of these one by one. The other thing that I can do is I could change this graph layout. So right now I have my pretty plain historical graph. I could also select another template that I have. So for example, my webinar template that we just created, and that'll give me the template or the series that we created before, which is the security, the PE ratio, and the shares outstanding. And I could, let me just get rid of these labels to be able to see that more easily. And then I could go through my securities more easily in terms of seeing the different series and seeing the different trends out there. So this is a really useful function. The other powerful thing that you'll want to do on these dashboards is really customize this table. And I'm just going to maximize this table to give you a sense of how to do that. So right now I have these columns on here, and these columns are what we call a view. And my view is selected here. It's called my valuation view. I could select different views here that I've created. When you log into Koyfin, you'll have some basic views. So for example, in here, I could have my fundamentals view, and these will be different columns as well. What you'll want to do is you want to create your own view. So on here, I can create a new view by clicking on that. I would call this webinar demo view. And similar concept to before, I could browse what I want in here. So if I go to security information, I could look at the name, I could look at the sector, I could look at the industry, I could look at the price change over the past day. I could look at the percent above 52-week high, below 52-week high. If I wanted to search for something, I could just type in PE and it would find it over here. And so I would select PE over here. And so notice these are now populating into my selection. And then let's say I wanted to move PE up here because I want it up there. And then I would save my webinar demo view. So now that I created my view, all the columns that I selected are over here. My webinar view is over here. It's called webinar demo view. And now I could use that view for any dashboard. So if you spend a little time to customize these views to select any of the columns you want in terms of performance, valuation, this is a really, really powerful feature that you'll want to utilize and really something that's differentiated. A common question that we get is, can I customize one of these columns? Can I have text? Can I have notes? Can I have shares? My purchase price? The answer is not right now. That's something we're working on in the next version, and that's going to be out shortly. We're working pretty hard to get that out. The last thing I'll mention on dashboards, which is another very cool thing, is to the extent that you create a dashboard. So I have my webinar demo view. You could share this dashboard with someone else. So if I share this dashboard, I would click on, and I would copy this link, and I would send this to my friend. I would send the link to my friend. My friend would then have this link. My friend would click on this link, and they would see webinar demo come up in their dashboards, and then they would follow the dashboard. There'll be a follow button here. Once my friend follows this dashboard, it'll appear in this in the menu up here. This is your dashboard menu. And so these are the dashboards that I'm following. So for example, Howard Lindzen has a dashboard called 8 to 80, which I'm following over here. And so when I click on that, I'll be able to see all the stocks in Howard's 8 to 80 list. If I want to delete one of Howard's stocks, I can't do that because this is Howard's dashboard. I don't control it. So I'm following this dashboard. I actually don't control it, but it's a really cool way to share and follow those people's dashboard. You can see here that I'm following this dashboard and not my own. So really cool way to create dashboards and to follow dashboards. The one other thing that I'll highlight, which is not super apparent, is if you want to delete a dashboard. So for example, the beautiful webinar dashboard that I created, I wanted to delete, that would be in the menu over here as well. So I would just scroll down here, webinar demo, little delete button. Let me remove that because I'm not really going to use it. Sorry, everyone. And now that dashboard is deleted and doesn't exist anymore. Cool. Okay, so that is it for the prepared remarks. I know that was very fast. I apologize. We have a lot of stuff on our system, but let me see if there's anything on the Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. You're welcome, Martin. Are there any saved are there saved templates for dashboards to view examples of what others are looking at? It's a great question. So right now you would have to get a dashboard from another user, but we are working on a portal of sorts to allow users to think about how to create dashboards and then share it with other people. So there'll be kind of like a portal concept where you can browse different dashboards that are happening. That's going to be the next version. You're welcome, Mary. Cool. If you're welcome, Taylor. If where can I find financial documents? So let me just answer that question real briefly. I went over it. So if I wanted to look at financial documents, I could pull up the ticker here. So if I pull up Apple, and remember this is the security analysis, I would then go to the financial analysis section. I would have all my financials here, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. If I wanted to look at the SEC documents, I would go to the news dashboard. And then here I could actually look for my 10Ks or 10Qs. So this would take you to the actual SEC website to look at the actual documents if you want to look at that as well. Is there a premium version? This seems like it would cost a lot to create and provide for free. Martin, there's no free version. There's no premium version right now, but we will have a premium version in the future. We are generously supported by our venture capitalist investors. You can thank them for providing this free version. But right now, Koyfin is totally free. And in the future, we're going to have a very substantial free offering and then a premium offering to give you advanced functionality and advanced data. Warren, your question on futures and options. We don't have futures and options right now. Futures is something that we're going to be getting shortly. Options is something we'll probably revisit at the end of the year, but definitely on our roadmap for sure. Is there a way to add tickers in bulk to dashboards? For example, yes, there is a way to add tickers in bulk to dashboards. If you watch the webinar, I actually went over that at the end of the My Dashboards presentation. So please make sure to go over that. Is it possible to have screening based on different factors? We are going to have a screening tool pretty soon, but right now there is no way to screen. The best way to screen right now, it's kind of a hack to a screen, is this market scatter page, which I didn't really cover in that detail, but you can select a universe that you're looking at. So for example, if I wanted to start at the S&P 500 and I wanted to look at the PE, so I'm just going to select PE here, and then I want to look at performance or price change, I think is the, no, so it's going to be, sorry, under performance. So in here, I could look at the stocks that on PE and on year-to-date price change, and then I'd be able to see the outliers. So then I could kind of zoom in and zoom out. So this is the, and then I could also sort this, or I could download this. So this is going to be your best bet for a screening functionality right now. I know it's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a more advanced screener, which is what we're building. But right now, this market scatter function is going to be your best bet for screening functionality. Is there a way to see a graph for each 2 or 3 tickers at the same time? What I have done is to create multiple windows. James, I'm not sure what you're asking about. If you could email our help desk, help@koyfin.com, then we would be able to answer that question, but I'm not sure what you mean. What would be included in advance or paid? Warren, we're not sure what's going to be included in the free versus paid. What I can tell you is that a lot of the stuff you see today is going to be in the free version. So if you think about kind of the other free websites out there, will be at least as good as them, if not better. So I don't know exactly what's going to be in the free versus paid, but the other thing I'll tell you is that if you create any dashboards or any templates, and those are going to be in the paid version, will allow you to keep anything you create today. So we're not going to take anything away from you. You may not be able to edit them, but we're not going to remove them to the extent that you create something and all of a sudden it's behind the paywall. Cool. All right. So we have 3 minutes to spare, which is great. I love finishing early. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for being a Koyfin supporter and a Koyfin user. And we'll have a lot of really cool stuff coming up. So please look out for that and feel free to email our help desk, help@koyfin.com. Thanks so much.